God sees possibilities even when others cannot. And God wants us to see the world in the very same way. This is one of the most important messages of our faith. This is one of the most important messages that emerged from David's story, that God sees possibilities in us even when others cannot. And I want to know, do you believe that? Do you remember that? What do you see when you look at the world around you? Do you see it the way that God sees it? Do you see possibilities? What do you see when you look at your coworkers or your colleagues, or you look at your students, or you look at your kids or your grandkids? Do you see possibilities? Or do you focus simply on their outward appearance? And what do you see when you look in the mirror? Do you see yourself the way that God sees you? Do you see possibilities? David wants us to remember this, that God sees something in us even when the rest of the world cannot. But he doesn't want us just to remember it. He wants us to believe it, to live like it, and then to see the rest of the world in the same way, which is something that Israel had forgotten to do. You know, Israel, they were looking for this big and strong and wealthy representative to lead their nation, but they had forgotten their story. They had forgotten their time in Egyptian captivity when they were this meager group of people who were enslaved by one of the biggest, nations or kingdoms of that day and age. And when they were delivered from that, when they were delivered from Egyptian captivity, God, when he chose a leader to lead them out of Egypt, he didn't choose this person of stature, this right candidate. He chose Moses, who was a murderer on the run, convinced Moses to do this extraordinary work as this ordinary person to lead the nation of Israel into the promised land. You see, God sees things differently. He doesn't look at the outward appearance. He looks at the inside. He sees in us possibilities even when everybody else cannot. This was Israel's story, and they had forgotten that. They had lost sight of it because we are so focused on the outward appearance. And this isn't just a problem with Israel. This is a problem that we have to this day and age. I think about how it is that we tend to see the world around us. And I think about all of the different pictures and the images that we see on our scrolling, social media feeds. Or I think about the way that we react to big, over-sensationalized news feeds. Or I think about how it is that we pay attention to the world around us. We look at the surface and the circumstantial and the outward appearance, and we say things, or we think to ourselves, they must be happy, or they must be successful, or they must be fulfilled, or we think, what's wrong with them? What happened to them? They clearly don't get it. We never push past the outward appearance, or at least we're prone to forget to. But God, through David, says, don't do that. Don't stop at the surface. Don't focus on outward appearance, but look deeper, look into the heart, and what you'll begin to see are possibilities that were previously unseen. God sees possibilities in us, even when the rest of the world cannot. This is God's way, and it continues to be God's way as you move into the New Testament, as you read the Gospels, and what you recognize is that Jesus time and time again is trying to invite us to see the very same thing, to see the world as he sees it, so that we might live like him. Change the world like him. I think about Jesus, and I think about his disciples, his followers, the people he was teaching and instructing. And I think Jesus wasn't like a Top Gun instructor. Jesus didn't have the best of the best at his disposal. When I was thinking about Jesus inviting his disciples, there were no Mavericks. There were no, Icemans. There was no, roosters or hangmans in today's version. There was like middle-aged tax collectors. There was ordinary fishermen at best. And Jesus time and time again is reminding these disciples, these people that he's leading, that said, I chose you, you didn't choose me. That's what he says to them in John 15. He says, you didn't choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you, just as you are, to go and bear fruit that will last, so that your Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. God knows us just as we are. And he has from the moment that we were being formed in the womb, and he doesn't see anything ordinary in us. Instead, he sees possibilities. He sees that we are capable of doing the extraordinary. God sees us, and he sees something in us. David wants us to know that God sees possibilities in us even when others cannot.